Okay, so let's cover really quick the avoiding thesis reading. Super simple, super easy. These are just things that I would like you to avoid in your writing of a paper. There is the and then writing, there's the all about writing, and then there's the data dump writing. So let's get to it. When it comes to the and then writing, I noticed sometimes this happens, especially in the narrative, because I don't give you like what I'm looking for. I'm like, just write. And so people just write, and before I know it, every now and then I'll get the and then writing. All right. And so what is and then writing? And then writing is a literal, like, because again, I say this happens in the drafts. This happens in the narrative because I say, tell me a story. And so in our head, we're like, well, let's tell the story in a chronological order. So we literally read off all the things that happened in the thing and go all the way through. And then we get to a point and it's like, you, what was the point of that? And that's what and then writing does. So on page 21 of the avoiding thesis, there's this fantastic example of what and then writing is. All right. And so it starts off, last fall and winter, I was living in Spokane with my brother, who during that time had a platonic girlfriend who came over to Seattle and stayed for the weekend. Her name was Karen, and we became interested in each other. And I went over to see her at the first of the year, and then invited me to supposedly the biggest party of the year called the Aristocrats Ball. And I said, sure. And I made my way back to Seattle in February, and it started out to be a bad Friday. And then my brother, see, and it keeps going. I would highly suggest reading it. Please read it. It's surprisingly interesting for like get to the point. So it keeps going. So I was going to get my, I have to read that part. The next morning when I was packing, I could not find my watch, and I decided that someone had to have taken it. We decided that it had to have been the goon that Karen had wound up with the night before because she was at her brother's house with him before she went home. So now I was going, so how was I going to get my watch back? We decided that the direct and honest approach to the problem would work. And then they go on and on to the very end where it's like, the moral of the story is don't drive 400 miles to see a girl you hardly know. And whatever you do, don't leave your valuables in the open. I am sure there is a much more uh, a better way to write that. That's organized, that's interesting, that's not. There's a lot in this that if you read, you're like, why? You did not need that. Take it out. Take it out. So remember when I say when we're doing our reorganizing our drafts, that's revision is reorganizing. There's parts in there like I really like this and I wrote it and I need to hit the word count, but it doesn't apply. Take that out. We don't need this and then writing and then this happened and then this happened. It's like just stop. Just please stop. So organize your ideas, take out the things that you don't need, and imagine you have to read this. You're writing it, and this is what I notice with students. They do this and they turn it in. They just write it, don't reread it, turn it in as the rough draft, and then they turn that rough draft in as a final. Oh, I know you do that because I see it. So I was kind of very lenient on the narratives because we're trying to get our feet wet again and trying to be like, okay, I'm sharing some personal information. I don't know what to do with this. I get that. But your research paper is going to be a lot different. And the reason why is I'm sitting here now like we learned how to write about ourselves and like chaos, I get that. But now we're going to try and organize our ideas. Again, outlining and rewriting, and it's going to take time. We're going to keep working on this. So that's why I don't want you just to sit and type it all out and then turn it in. I want you to take a minute and go, well, it sounds like I'm doing a lot of and then writing. And maybe I should stop and take some things out and reorganize it because deep down, I don't even want to read it. And I'm not saying I haven't done that because, of course, I have. I've been in school a long time. A long time. I'm still in school, right? I do homework every weekend. That's called grading. It's a lot of work. And getting classes together, that's homework too. Okay. So, the next thing I see that happens in research is the all about writing. Okay, so all about writing is when you write about something and it sounds like someone's just reading like an encyclopedia entry. Okay, and I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to write something that sounds like an encyclopedia entry. And so, what I mean by that is if we're talking about, so, and the reason why I say this is encyclopedia types of topics are those Google topics that I hate. I hate the Google topics because it doesn't give me anything. I could answer that. So, say you're talking about, let's see, what does the book say? Charles Darwin. So, say you're talking about Darwinism, and instead of actually talking about Darwinism, you just talk about the life of Darwin. I could research that. I don't care about that. And so what happens is, and the reason why I get so like annoyed with those topics is because, again, you're going about and talking about, here's Charles Darwin's early childhood. Here's how he became interested in evolution. Here's the voyage he took with the Beagle to get to the Galapagos Island. Here's an explanation of his theory. And then here's his influences. I'm like, that information could be a paragraph with a couple sentences where you're like, this is the understanding of who Darwin is. Let's talk about the understanding of Darwin's, theory of evolution and compare it to the Kumalipo from Hawaii. How do those compare? Let's have that conversation. Do you see the difference? Okay, so the encyclopedia, I don't want that. I don't need this like, oh, the history, like your whole paper on the history of who Darwin is. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I don't care. I can literally Google who Darwin is if I really need to know who that is. You would spend just a little bit of time explaining who he is and why he matters and why it's important that we use his information to compare it to the Hawaiian history of the Kumalipo, right? Ta-da. So that is why it's very important that you don't do, again, those little Google topics. And I know we keep beating that down, but I really truly mean it because you are critical thinkers. That's what we break open our minds to try and find out more than just that basic, encyclopedia information that, again, I can Google. Okay. Other reading covers that, and these really good examples. Please check out the reading. I would highly suggest highlighting if you want to print it or if you can. You can download it, whatever you want to do with those papers that you can work with. Okay. Next, the last one is called data dumping. Okay. I know in a research paper, we get a lot of information, especially when you start going through the scholarly journals. You're like, I have all this information. What do I do with it? Just pick the things that are important and matter and apply to your topic. That's all you need to do. You don't have to throw in everything. So the data dump is pretty much where you just throw in information. You're like, I don't know, here's this and here's this. But it doesn't correlate. It doesn't really mean anything. You're just giving me information, but there's no structure to it. Don't data dump. Don't throw in information just because you have it. Just because you have the data doesn't mean it's pertinent to your topic. It doesn't mean it applies, and it doesn't mean you need it. Just because you found it doesn't mean it's necessary. And that's okay. Again, if it doesn't serve you, get rid of it. Okay. And that might happen as you do your first source summary and you add that information. You're like, I'm not going to be using those sources in my research paper. That's okay. Don't use it. Just because you researched it and used it in a source summary doesn't mean it applies to your paper. So you can get rid of it and put in a different source. Again, your final paper is going to require at least 6 sources. I give you the opportunity to use 6 within the source summary, but I'm telling you, you're going to find much more. And that's okay. You can use as much information as you need. But when you go to put it into your paper, make it worthwhile, make it necessary. That's it. You want to make your information necessary. So let's see if there's something here. The problem with data dumping is it has no discernible structure. When you just start throwing stuff in there, it's like, there's all this information. I don't know what this information is even doing here. Like, why do we need this? So that's why we have the outline. And for every topic and every subtopic, you can have research, and that research applies to that topic, and that research applies to that. When you organize it in that way, it makes it so much easier, and it's organized. And then you're like, well, this research doesn't apply to that topic. I don't need it. I don't need it. Remember SpongeBob? I don't need it. I don't need it. Nobody? Okay. Anyway. All right. So don't do the data dump. Only use the information that you need. Okay. So the reason why I push very hard for these is because I want you to be mindful of the way you're turning in these papers. Like, I get it. Maybe you were in high school during the pandemic and teachers were as overwhelmed as I was overwhelmed. And they're like, oh, whatever, just turn something in, right? We're not doing that anymore. This is like you're paying for the class and I'm giving you all the tools to use in class. Like I can't write these papers for you, but I can tell you some ways to write a better paper. Okay, so I'm giving you the tools. You get to use them. All right. Let's see here. Cool. So, social self. I'm going to go ahead and give you just a second to take a look at the quiz. It's going to be super easy, and then you're going to come right back.